Okay. It says we are live. Right. And I need to do that, and I need to put on our recording so you get this too.
All right.
All right. Nancy Hicks Marshall. You like to be called, you have your screen as Nancy Marshall.
That's good
And
enough.
that's good enough. Well, hello to all who are going to be listening. And today is a day of celebration for Nancy. This is her beautiful book. You have yours right there so we can hold it up and boast about it.
I've been talking to.
Finding Zechariah. This is just such a beautiful day of celebration. Nancy, you've written several books. This is what, the fourth or fifth book you've written now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
fourth or fifth or sixth.
Or sixth, yes.
Depends on which ones you count, but
Yeah.
probably fourth.
Awesome.
Um,
Well, it's a celebration, and I absolutely love this book. And there's a story behind the story all the way through this. And I wanted to have the conversation of where the idea came for this story, and let's get the backstory on this.
ah, well, I ran into Darren Chapman and Tiger Mountain Foundation about 15 years ago when he was pitching to a donor group why they should give Tiger Mountain a grant to educate children in a community garden. And he's a very good salesman. So I was kind of intrigued. But I've also been a gardener all my life. And my father was he had a victory garden during World War II. So I like getting my hands in the dirt and growing vegetables.
Me too.
So I went down and volunteered at the community garden. And there are actually two different spaces in South Phoenix where Tiger Mountain works. One is theirs exclusively, and the other is the much larger garden called Spaces of Opportunity, which is a real community garden. And I think the history of that property is that way back when, 50 years ago, it was plumbed by the Salt River Project for agriculture. Then it was abandoned. Then it was purchased by a school district and left as basically an abandoned lot for maybe 20, 30, 40 years.
Wow.
And then some people from the community in South Phoenix said, it's plumbed for irrigation for growing things. Let's make a community garden. Meanwhile, there really is a feral cat. Feral cats show up wherever they need to show up to catch birds and mice and make a living.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
eat food for themselves. And after spending several years off and on volunteering there, I felt like Tiger Mountain Foundation has done so much work trying to help people at risk restore their lives. And I wanted to write something for them, about them, but not just a nonfiction kind of, this is what all you good guys tried to do, because I don't actually know all the details of everything they've tried to do. But it came to me that there was a story in this garden that could be put pieces together that both had to do with how you make a community garden. That is, the soil, the mulch, the irrigation.
Especially on a desert.
Yes, especially in the desert. And then there's another story of the humans. And one story is simply that the humans come and they do work and they learn to be reliable when they had not been before. But there are all kinds of people who come to this garden, including Zechariah, who I've never actually met Zechariah personally, but people who've read the story have said he's been there. I've met him. I've met the down and out person who wound up being homeless, living on the the abandoned couch. I'm trying not to be seen because then the cops would take them away, but not having a place to go and using alcohol as their best friend. So for me, that was an obvious starting point.
Mhm. And the starting point, the cool part about it is it's the cat telling the story. And I love the way you made it come to life. And it really showed the effects on the healing that took place
Yeah.
throughout because of the story, and really showcased what people can do by just working together. It was just truly beautiful story.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I read several books about cats before I plunged into developing the character of Sebastian because he was not he was never a domestic cat. His mother had been a domestic cat, and the definition of feral cat is they're kind of a domestic cat who's living on the wild. It's not the same as a bobcat or a lion or a
Right, right.
lynx. Um, and they're very skittish about humans, but they also kind of depend on humans to feed them when humans are around. So being in a community garden, being in an abandoned lot, he was not used to having any help. But Zachariah showed up, and the beautiful thing about a cat as well as a dog is, as far as I know, they're the only non-judgmental companions we humans regularly have. And Zachariah so much needed somebody who would not judge him when he confessed that he was just a rotten human being. And the thing is, he'd been a lovely human being. And then he'd been in the war and he'd gotten PTSD and he'd beat up his wife and wound up in prison because that's what war and PTSD can do to you. And he didn't want to be that kind of person. And he was telling the cat all about this, and the cat got some tuna fish out of the deal. He said, yeah, I understand.
You had a listening ear.
But the cat also has the opportunity to roam around and see everybody, even when they don't see him. So he's more, he can be a real character and be more omniscient, and I can't remember the word for going absolutely everywhere. He's not omnipotent. He can't do everything, but he can go everywhere, see everybody, and know everything. Like
Right.
none of the other humans could know as much as he did.
But nobody would suspect the cat to know it all.
Right, right.
Uh,
Um,
so that is the fun of this story is the cat is the character and quite a character in your story. And yet he's able to make friends with just about everybody there. You know?
right. Well, he's cautious, and as you notice, there's a mom and her kid, two kids who come to the garden, who, as we learn, are the two kids and the mom who don't see Zachariah anymore because he was violent to the mom. And the kids miss their dad and they don't understand it all. And she's still bruised and unhappy. But Sebastian the cat makes friends with the kids because kids are the kind of people you make friends with. Adults, you got to be
Maybe
careful
not.
with them. So he's not really friends with the mom and he's not really friends with Big Joe, but he knows them all and he knows what they all do. So it was leading up to him being able to help the kids and the dad make a connection that was safe, where they realized not only that they were all present in this real 20-acre garden. I mean, the 20-acre garden has trees you can't see from one end to the other. It's really quite a wonderful place. So Zachariah really could be hiding from his family because they have an order of protection against him. But the cat could hang out with the kids and he could hang out with Zachariah and he could make them all feel that he likes them okay, which helped them all find each other.
Find each other. That's yeah.
I think I hope somebody picks up on this. There's about 3 or 4 meanings that I can think of in the title. I mean,
Right.
the first obvious one is that the cat finds Zachariah, but Zachariah finds Zachariah too.
hmm And then
And
the kids find Zachariah.
kids find Zachariah, and the mom, Otonia, finds Zachariah. And as he's finding himself, he manages to get a handle on his alcohol and get a handle on his PTSD. And I didn't want to make a gooey ending, but I did want it to look hopeful because I think that's very realistic. You know, we're all bruised humans in one
We
way or
are.
another.
We don't get
And
out of life without that.
we don't get out of life without being bruised at least 5 or 10 times. And sometimes those bruises make us react in ways that we'd prefer not to have reacted once we do. And we're all kind of a work in progress. So Zachariah is definitely a work in progress, but so is Otonia, his wife, and so are the kids. And they're just 12 going on 13, which is a real work in progress time of life for them.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of hope that things will all turn out better for all of them
And
after
I'm
they.
sure they will, because I think, you know, the father, Zechariah, actually took a lot of measures to try to get help. And he even has a service dog that helps him kind of mend and understands this telltale signs when something comes up, you know.
Yeah, I really I've been around a lot of cats and dogs, including vets with service dogs. And what really struck me about it took me a while to realize that Zachariah needed a service dog and I was going to find one for him. But what struck me about service dogs is they know how to be chill. They are with their person and they are chill and they are easygoing and they're always ready to protect them or alert them to danger. So when it happens, they're right there doing their job. But the rest of the time, they're just looking like chill animals. And the animals can talk to each other in ways that humans don't always understand. So I was really glad to find him. And I liked calling him Marley. Several people in this book have names that resonated with me, like Wiley, the muralist, is not just any muralist. He's the I took the name from the muralist who painted President Obama and his wife,
Wow.
because this garden is a very multicultural garden. And I thought that would be a nice name for the muralist. And then Latifah, who runs the bees, I don't know if you've read the book or seen the movie, The
Yeah.
Secret Life of Bees, but I love Queen Latifah. I just
Yeah, I know. It's so cool.
honoring
Yeah.
her person by slipping that name in it. It seemed okay, you know. Um,
But
but
what is interesting as well is that you wove in the things that need to be done, especially in a garden on the desert. And you know, gardening in the desert is totally different than gardening anywhere else. And you have a lot of different terms, a lot of resources at the end of the book. So it's really fascinating how you put it all together, because there is a challenge if you're from somewhere else, when you're used to gardening this spring and summer, it's really a different thing. You know,
you plant your vegetables in May and by June they're dead. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
really.
yeah.
And the fact that we none of our, like, I have a garden in my back alley, and there's a vine that crawls over the wall that drops dead leaves into the soil, which makes it not clay at all. But since it rains so seldom, none of those leaves decompose on their own and make good soil and good mulch. And that's something in the desert we have to do ourselves, is to make it wet and make it turn into compost, because wetness is part of what makes that all happen. And
Mhm.
it doesn't happen without our help. And
No, it does not.
but I will confess, I covered a lot of bases, um, which I think should be, what would I say, triggers or stepping points for people, whether they're children at school in a learning situation or beginning adult farmers or gardeners. I am not as deep and skilled as I am going to be after I take the Master Gardener course. Um, I think I look more experienced Works very brilliant, but I'm very enthusiastic. So I
That's
hope people
awesome.
will take some of the information, like on irrigation, on drip irrigation, not as the end of everything they need to know, but the starting point from which they need to do more homework so they get it even better than I did.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you know, this is an amazing book. So what's next for you? Are you writing another book? What's in the cards?
First of all, I want to find some places where this one where people will really enjoy it and benefit from it. But one of the things that has bothered me for the last 4 years is it's a political book and it would probably be nonfiction.
Excuse me.
There's a number of people involved in the election process who were honorable, honest, doing their jobs, and were threatened and attacked for their integrity. I would like to write a book that would be a series of biographical stories about people who we know them as professional adults who stood up to threats. But I would like to know about their youth and how come they, as young people, learned to be honorable people and try to do the honest thing so that when the time come and they were really challenged, they were able to stay with doing the right thing.
Keeping integrity no matter what
Yeah.
the cost is.
Yeah. And I would love to have, this is going to be a big challenge for me because most of the people I have in mind are not people I know personally, but people I've seen in the news who I admire. And they're not people whose young lives I know. So what I want to do is find a way to interview them about their youth, about their childhood, and what formed their character, if they can remember, so that it's a book about young people and what
Would be
influenced them to have the strength to stand up to. I mean, their lives were threatened. People had to
yes.
move out of their homes because people were threatening violence and death to honest workers, and it startles
People
me.
that were just doing what they were supposed to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the fact that they stood up to it is wonderful, but I wonder what it is that helps a person as a young person know that that's how they want to be. So I'm really
That
curious.
would be a fun challenge.
That's exactly how I see it, a fun challenge. Now I've got to
Yeah.
get some people to talk to me. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, how awesome. Well, you know, your books are just very unique and every one of them are different one from the other. There's The Rattler's Tale. What's The Rattler's Tale about?
The Rattler's Tale is clearly a children's book. I think Finding Zachariah is a middle school kid's book because of the level of the writing and the fact that middle school kids are struggling with a family that's been split up. But Rattler's Tale is about wild animals in the Prescott National Forest. It could be any national forest, but that's the one I know real well. And when they interact with humans. And again, I did a first draft on Rattler's Tale 20 years ago, and I was bored because it was a human telling the story. And one morning I woke up and realized the rattlesnake is the one who ought to tell the story about his fellow wild creatures, because he slithers around the neighborhood and knows all the animals and knows the humans and mostly is not seen, but knows everything. So I just found it great. It was great fun to write from his perspective. And I think my best compliment on that book was somebody said, you know, that Rattler, he's a sixth grader.
Oh,
And the third book that I want to mention is A Dry Hate. I'm thinking it's the perfect title, but it may be a put off to people. I was very well acquainted with abuse of power by the former sheriff of Maricopa County. And I wound up defending one of the people who had been unjustly arrested, one of the very minor people. But it seemed to me, again, a story in which all kinds of people are affected when a person is elected to political office and then they do whatever they want and they don't follow either the Constitution or their oath of office. And for example, a sheriff does not have the political right to arrest anybody he feels like political opponents, but he does have the obligation to run the jail and get the inmates to their court hearings. And the previous sheriff totally ignored his office obligations. And what I wanted to explore a little bit, what I wanted to explore in the book was how people felt when things were going crazy. But what I wrote in a little afterward was every single job you know and I know has job requirements, so that if you get hired, for example, to be a teacher, and the principal says, you have to stay after work and be in my office alone with me for totally non-teaching reasons, that's asking the teacher to violate because they take an oath of office too, an oath or an affirmation.
Mhm.
Every job we know, whether it's you're going to work in the garden center, you're going to be the secretary in the front office, you're going to be hauling mulch in the garden, you're going to be on a construction crew. Every single one of you is hired to do something that you've agreed to do. And when you decide you're going to do something totally else, especially if you're paid by taxpayers, that's an abuse of power. And I think of these oaths of office as neutral. Whoever the sheriff is, black, white, tall, short,
Doesn't
male,
matter, right?
Republican, Democrat, they all have to run the jail safely. And it's not a pleasant job because some of the people in there are mentally ill, and those are not easy people. But it doesn't matter what party you're with. You have to do that job and do it as well as you can. And if you start letting abuse take place, then people die in your jail, for example, as people did in the 2000s in our jail. And then their surviving family brings a lawsuit for wrongful death, and they'll win because the evidence is against the sheriff's conduct. And that's very expensive for taxpayers. So we should all, I think, want to be neutral as to everyone's performance of office.
Absolutely.
And that's what I was trying to get at with that one.
Very cool. Your books are just fascinating. I love your vivid imagination that you could weave it all together. And I'm so happy that you're doing.
Well, and I appreciate the editing experience I've had with you, Becky, because I feel like having edited A Dry Hate with you made it an award-winning book. It was chosen as the best fiction from the National Federation of Presswomen. That means people nationally thought that was a really good book compared to all the other ones in the competition. That really surprised me, but it also led me to, I believe, make Finding Zachariah written better.
Right.
You may or may not like the story, but I feel like learning how to make better sentences, make more coherent thoughts, you've really helped me out with that. And I think people should look for awards for good writing as a reason to buy a book, because they should enjoy it more than one that's not that well written.
And it's such a journey. I find that some people really resist the editing aspect of it. It's such an emotional piece because it's not always fun to have your work kind of chomped on, by somebody else. And yet that's what that refines it and makes it much more reading pleasure. If you're a reader and you really like to read, let's hope it's a well-edited book, because otherwise it can be really clumsy to read a book like that. Yeah. Well, for those of you that are listening, if you go to Amazon, you can always type in just Nancy Hicks Marshall. I think most of
better type in Nancy Hicks Marshall.
Yeah.
There's some other Nancy Marshalls around the country.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Yes, Nancy Hicks Marshall on Amazon, and you'll see a whole listing of the books that
and currently Finding Zachariah, if you have a Kindle, you can get it for 99 cents. And
Right.
currently it's $10 on Amazon. It'll be going up to $12.95 after this spurt of launching enthusiasm, which I think is a reasonable price for a good little book.
It's an amazing book. Very good. Well, we really celebrate with you today to, just to know that you've accomplished such major good. And a book like this, it is so touching. It is so touching because it is so real to life. And it's something that families are facing, when their loved ones come back from serving our country. Sometimes they've gone through horrible things, and they're not the same. And it's up to us to understand that and also help them to get the help that they need.
Yes. And I hope they do. And I hope a lot of people will be able to read this book. It's not that long, but it has a lot packed in it. That they'll see that, yes, there is help available. And among other things, I know that vets sometimes have peer group counseling so that all the guys and gals in the group have all suffered PTSD. Maybe they've all been in the same war or served in the same place overseas. And there's a phrase, a trauma bond. They've suffered in it together. And actually, I use that kind of a joke in A Dry Hate when the professor and his attorney are both arrested and thrown in jail.
Mhm.
They have I'm trying to build a romance out of two crusty people, but they have a trauma bond, and a trauma bond does bring people together in a way that remains with them for a very long time. And sometimes it helps them heal together. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. We celebrate this day with you and looking forward to seeing the next major piece of accomplishment come to the fore.
we'll see. We'll see about that. Thank you so much,
Right.
Becky. It's been
Thank
really
you.
nice working with you.
It's been awesome. So for those that listen to this, be sure and there's links that have been provided. Be sure and pick up a copy, share it. That's a cool thing. And if you read it and enjoy it, post a review.
Yes.
Yep.
And in the near future, I will be doing a recording of this. So it'll be an audio book as well. That'll take probably a couple of months to accomplish. But if you have friends who prefer audiobooks or need audiobooks, this one will be a really easy one to listen to, I believe.
Awesome. Very good. Congratulations to you.
Thank you, Becky.
All
On to
right.
the
Thank
next.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. And I got to